When it comes to this Stoic journey that you're on, are you all talk and no action? That's really the question that we are asking ourselves this week in week 32 of our 52-week journey following A Handbook for New Stoics, a book by Massimo Peglucci and Gregory Lopez. Hi, welcome to the porch. I am Amy Akowski. I'm here with Rob Hunter and the beautiful Sierra Ram Cantrell. And as I said, we are on this 52-week journey, and thank you so much for joining us as we go along this together. We are all new students of Stoicism, and we are trying to improve and flex our newly formed Stoic muscles. Week 32's lesson from this book is talking about practicing Stoic sympathy stealthily. It's quite a mouthful. Really, what they're trying to advise us here is don't necessarily be, we'll say, trouncing your stoicism around and trying to tell other people how to live their lives in a stoic way, which is kind of ironic because this is partially what we're doing here on these videos. But ultimately, what we're trying to do and what the Stoics and what the lesson advises us is be a representative through your actions of how to be a better person or how to live a more stoically focused life. As always, they talk about here just not wearing the stoicism on your sleeve. And they have a quote here, which they include in every lesson from Seneca. I won't touch on all of it, just the key points. Talks about we should rejoice with all in their joys and sympathize with them in their troubles and remembering what we should offer and what we should withhold when it comes to our advice, and especially our advice on what we believe is the better path of life through Stoicism. Don't try to teach others if they're not ready to hear it. So on that note, I'd like to open it up to get your feedback, Rob and Sierra, on what you thought about this lesson, at least first impressions, and then we'll keep diving into some of the exercises they had us complete.
Well, they do say, unless you are a teacher, Epictetus made an exception in that case. So, at first I'm reading this and I'm like, oh man, how are we going to talk about this in our Stoic lesson? It says we're not supposed to be talking about it. But we are here to help be teachers. But what I took away that I circled about 10,000 times in my reader is actions speak volumes. And so the idea is to demonstrate these, do as I say, not as I do. Do as I do, not as I say. We're flipping the script on that. So showing how to be stoic and teaching it that way.
Mm-hmm.
Don't talk about it, be about it, what it comes down to.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Mm-hmm. But it's tricky because, again, you want to put this in your life, these Stoic principles, because one of the main things is the dichotomy of control. But this is where you practice it, because you are in control of what you say, what you do, what you think. Maybe not your initial thought, and they make a point about that when it comes to judgments. If I catch myself judging someone, I'll say to myself, I don't know all the reasons for their behavior. This is a practice in space, which we've talked about a few times in these lessons. Giving yourself space, because your body and your mind do things automatically, which make you want to tell people, oh, the Stoics would do this, or the Stoics would say this. But sometimes it's best to just be quiet, maybe ask another question, or maybe just understand that wherever another person is at in their life, they're making the best choice based on all of their experiences leading up to that moment. It's very difficult to do, but that's the point. The point is to create that space so you can be about it and not talk about it.
Right. We're so apt, I think, nowadays to offer our opinions about, a litany of things, but especially if we
Can I interrupt? So much so that if someone doesn't say it, you're like, do you have an opinion on this? No?
No.
Anyways, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
That's okay.
Yeah.
But with that, when we offer our opinions, a lot of times it's unsolicited. So if we have a friend who has come to us with a problem, or we're observing something that is maybe not quite up and up, we want to provide our advice, and often we can tend to do it in a way where we're almost, I'll say, scolding them with their behavior, and at the same time trying to offer an alternative through something like Stoicism. But
Parenting them in a way.
But what they say, I love this. There's a couple things from Seneca at the end of the quote: "A man may be wise without parade." And basically it's saying, you know, don't, to put it here, they say, don't go brandishing Stoicism as a stick to beat others on the head with. Instead, keep your own soul in order and let it shine through your practice. Be an example of it. So it's not you telling somebody, well, in Stoicism, this is the way you're supposed to behave. It's more so through your behavior, people go, you seem different. What's going on here? So it's solicited. You're not offering it unsolicited in your practice.
And I think the other part about that is, one of the Stoic principles is that everyone really is the same. Everyone's equal. And if you go back a few weeks ago, we talked about human beings are meant to collaborate, meant to work together. And one of the ways that that will truly happen is if we decide amongst ourselves as individuals that everyone as an individual is the same as we are. We all come from the same place. If you go back however many thousands of years ago, there's only, from even then, there's only 2% or something that's different about all of us. Mm-hmm. We often focus on those 2% rather than the 98% that binds us together, because ultimately we have to determine if we want to survive as a species or not. And the best way to do that is to work together. And at some point, we're going to have to make that decision, whether it's the earth is battling against us, whether it's the sun's going to explode, whether the aliens attack. At some point, we're going to have to go, okay, it's really time for us to collaborate. And the base of Stoicism, to me, is about Sierra, Amy, you. We're all the same. We're all equals. We just have different experiences. And if you don't judge the other person's experiences, thoughts, opinions, which those thoughts and opinions are based on those experiences, you're in a much better spot. And just the simple act of not judging and not offering your opinion about everything is eye-catching or ear-catching. Like, wait, Sierra didn't say anything about this. I wonder why.
She didn't fly off the handle. Mm-hmm. She seemed to handle it pretty chill. How are you so chill, Sierra?
Yes.
Well, I often think about years ago, when I worked at the Fairmont, I was part of a team that transitioned our spa to we were a spa, kind of a traditional spa with facials and massages and that kind of thing. And we transitioned to a different type of a spa, an intentional wellness spa. And one of the main tenets or driving forces that we had in that team was to meet people where they're at. So in other words, you have to meet people on the part of the path that they are on and just kind of be there with them. And sometimes that takes extra observation, because it's so easy to say, well, this is where I'm at. And this is, after X number of years, this is what I've arrived at. Well, your path is different and than that person's path. So if you meet them there and if you kind of work with them where they're at, which involves a lot of listening, then you can serve better. If service is needed, sometimes a person just wants to be heard and that's it.
Mm-hmm. And that's part of what they talk about in this lesson. They say that the way that we can practice this skill of not beating Stoicism over people's heads, but rather serving as an example, they have 3 different things that they talk about having us do. The first one is practice sympathy. And we talked about very early on, maybe weeks 3 or 4, about the Stoic difference between sympathy and empathy. And so I won't get deep into that, but basically it's saying that whenever you bump into someone, either they come to you with something or you observe them experiencing some sort of heightened emotion, rather than teaching them necessarily aggressively, sometimes teaching them about how to better handle it, instead it's simply just taking a few minutes to understand where they're coming from. Just listen without offering advice. You can sympathize with them. Yes, you can sympathize with them, but don't necessarily, they say you can sympathize, not stoicize. And it's more meeting them where they're at, also just taking a moment to pause to recognize and sympathize with where it is they're at on their journey. Because you're exactly right, Sierra, they might not be in the same place. It's better to walk alongside them than to try to drag them up to where you are.
And the other part they add is to challenge those judgmental thoughts that come automatically. So in the course that I created, Master Your Message, we talk a lot about judgments and how it impacts how you communicate, because they do. Because you might see someone and you're going to make an automatic reactionary judgment. And in Sierra's course, Radical Mindfulness, she talks about really the reason why those happen. It's our survival instinct that our brain was designed to do. It's, again, the number one goal of any species, whether it's us or whether it's a bear, is to survive, to further the species. So it's that automatic reaction that that person might be dangerous. Stay away from that person, even though you don't have any information that tells you whether or not that person is dangerous. What they want you to do is challenge, why do I think that person is dangerous? Or why do I think that person is wrong about life or politics or whatever? Why am I having this judgment? And then, okay, let me move past this judgment and get into a neutral spot where I'm not judging, because you're getting away from your automatic reaction. Because we as humans have evolved to create a much safer world than it was when our ancestors were running around the earth trying to figure out what's dangerous and what's not. We've learned collectively what's dangerous and what's not, so that everything that our body does isn't accurate anymore. It isn't needed to be in that survival mode. So that's one of the things I love about challenging your judgment thoughts that comes after your sympathy versus empathy, leaning towards the sympathy side of things.
See people where they are, and then you're, as you talk about, Rob, in your program, Master Your Message, it's, you can't stop the automatic thought. It is what it is. It happens because of those instinctual, evolutionary triggers that we have. But it's being able to recognize or pause and not letting that judgment be how you communicate with them or how you then interact with them.
And, even if you want to add martial arts into it, this is a big base in martial arts. Some of them are defensive, right? Because you want your opponent to react first, and then you use that reaction to your counteraction. And that's a more of a dangerous situation, but you're still calm in that moment if you're practicing it well enough to be able to use their momentum to push it away or to counterattack or whatever the case may be. It's the same thing with your survival instincts. If you are in those moments where it is actually dangerous, the calmer you are, the better you will be able to react no matter the situation.
Right.
So one of the things they always have us do in these lessons is set some very practical action steps that we can take to help us remind ourselves to practice stealthy stoicism. So Sierra, for you, of the three, they talk about practicing sympathy, not passing judgment or trying to recognize and not let the judgment drive you. And then the third thing was not necessarily mentioning your Stoic practice as part of your conversation with others. So of those three, and you can add all three, what were some of your implementation intentions that you noticed, you documented?
Well, the third skill, which is not mentioning your Stoic practice and not giving advice to anyone. So that third step is what resonated with me, and I just said, let each person walk their own path. That was my implementation instruction, is I can only control my actions, so I will demonstrate the best I can by embodying the Stoic virtues, but ultimately letting each person walk the walk themselves.
How about you, Rob?
I love that one. I think that's really right on, Sierra. And I would mine big one is the challenging the judgmental thought, something I've been trying to work on for a while. So, but I like that step too, is we have a natural tendency to want to solve other people's problems for them. And it never goes over well, but for some reason, we never learn to not do it. We never learn to just sit and listen and ask some questions and sympathize. So the three combination is really a great place to be because it reminds you not to be obnoxious. Whether it's the Stoic Marcus Aurelius would say, or I would say this, or what about this solution? It reminds you again to pause before you speak, which is the basis of this lesson.
Mm-hmm.
Don't overreact.
What about you?
So the one for me that stuck out for me the most was regarding the judgments. And what I said is, I don't know their story. Their journey was not the same as mine. Mm-hmm. And so recognizing that can help me practice some of that sympathy, and yet also know that they are on their own path. And eventually, maybe through my actions or through what we're sharing as teaching, there can be something that sparks their interest and they pursue this path and hopefully find ultimate, contentment and a virtuous living through it.
This is very challenging for me. I'm a talk show host in my day job.
He has a couple opinions.
So I have to give opinions. So this, I wrote that down in my note, is that, okay, how do you find that balance? Or in that role, if I'm judging, can I do it in a positive, constructive way versus not? So it's not just piling on unnecessarily.
Well, one of the final thoughts that they had here on page 191, I did love, is that if you think about it from a trigger perspective, how can I be more mindful? We have our implementation intentions that we all talked about here, but the trigger is anytime you find yourself starting to offer advice or having a judgment, that's a cue for you to look inward. You shift your focus inward rather than on the other person. So if you are experiencing a judgment for them, that's your cue to go, why am I judging them that way? As opposed to, well, they should be behaving X, Y, and Z way. So on this note, lesson, did we find this lesson helpful? We're always asked to evaluate that at the end of the day.
I did, because it's challenging. And I've learned to, through this book in particular and other things, embrace those challenging moments, embrace those things that make you uncomfortable, because that's where you learn about yourself and that's where growth is.
Mm-hmm. You can't build a muscle without a little bit of tension, right?
This muscle.
This one.
How about you, Sierra? Any final thoughts?
I did. I found it useful. I also found that I needed, just like Rob was saying about his job on the radio, I have to compartmentalize, because when I'm teaching my son, that is clearly I'm in a teaching role, and he's young, he's 6 years old, so he needs a lot of guidance. But when I'm out of that role of teaching, when I'm just kind of being regular old Sierra, when to just sort of let that go and like, okay, I'm off the clock right now. I can just listen.
I like that, off the clock. That's a good way to look at it.
And just listening. I love that. Talk less, listen more, to not only listen for those cues, those triggers that we talked about as a way to then be introspective, but also just providing the opportunity for people to share where they're at, as opposed to you trying to bring them up where you want them to be. Well, wonderful. Well, thank you both. I think every lesson in this book has been invaluable in some way, some bigger than others, but this was a great one just to remember. You can be a prophet of Stoicism, but only if they come to you. Don't force it on them. And exercise it through your actions less than your words. So now we have, in our next week, we have week 33, where Rob, you are going to be leading us in the lesson about setting up social rules for living. Yes. So we'll have to see and dig into what that one's going to have, what new challenge we're going to be asked to explore for the following week.
Social rules or social media rules? I'm not sure.
Oh yeah. Probably both nowadays, because that's just another way that we are interacting with society, right? Above and beyond the face-to-face or in person. Yeah. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. If you'd like to participate, we would love to have you share your feedback. If you're going through this journey as well, what struggles because obviously we share all of ours, what struggles you might be experiencing, what ahas you may have had. You can do so by simply adding a comment to the bottom of this video, or you can join along with us in our virtual book club where we dig a little deeper into some of these ideas. But either way, thank you so much for joining us on the Painted Porch. As I said, I'm Amy. For Rob and Sierra, we hope to see you again next week. And until then, keep practicing your stealthy Stoic sympathy.